Gaslighting refers to when someone uses false information to try to convince you of something that is false in order to get you to question your own sanity. They're trying to get you to question your own grip on reality. And it's a tactic used often by narcissists. Today I want to talk a little bit more about narcissism, gaslighting, and some of my own personal experiences with these things. So first of all, gaslighting comes from a play in the 1930s, which was later adapted to two separate films by the same name, Gaslight. And it was a man who was trying to steal jewels from his wife. And in order to do that, he was trying to convince her that she was insane. And so he did a bunch of things and then pretended like they weren't happening. And one of the things he did is he flickered the gas lights. So the lights in the dining room or wherever they were, he would have them flickered, but then he would tell her they're not flickering, that's totally in your head. And so that's where the term comes from. And he's intentionally doing this. He's lying to her in order to get her to question her sanity. And in the film, he was found out, so it had a happy ending. But this happens very commonly if you are in a relationship with a narcissist. Narcissists tend to come from a place of insecurity, even though they often seem confident and have bravado. A narcissist is someone who often has insecurity at the core of their being. So much insecurity that they often tend to be very controlling, and part of that control is to convince you of their version of reality, and sometimes at the expense of actual reality. And then they try to get you to question your own reality. Signs you might be in a relationship with a narcissist is if you find yourself wanting to actually record conversations that you've had with a narcissist, with your spouse or partner. If you're wanting to record conversations because they keep saying things that you don't remember, and they say, oh, you said this or you did this, and you know that you didn't do those things, and you actually start thinking, oh, well, can we start recording our conversations because you're remembering things so wildly different. And I've certainly been in this situation myself where I felt like, wow, I really need to record things because it's just getting out of hand. So I do want to talk about an email I received very recently in the last couple weeks from someone I dated a long time ago, but for a very long portion of my life. And I don't want to identify this person, that's not the important part here. What is important is this email I received was so validating to so many things that I saw and understood at the time, but just wasn't mature enough to really work through. And so that sounded kind of vague, but let me get a little more clear. As I read her email, it was clear to me that the facts that she was trying to push were just so incredibly out there and bizarre and absolutely false. And it's not a perspective like he said, she said. I mean, these are just false things. For example, she said, I gave her a toilet for her birthday, which never happened. She said, I forced her to wash my father's feet, and she had a question mark after that, and forced her to wash my grandmother's feet and a question mark after that, and several other things that just frankly did not happen. And while I was dating her, it was so challenging because she often would see reality in this very twisted and darker way than it was actually happening. And so she often found ways to be really upset with me. And I got to the point where I was like, wow, I really am doing things, I think, well. And she keeps seeing things that aren't there. And this email was such a validation of that because I saw these things in black and white that just, wow, I mean, she's either created these false memories, or she's absolutely gone to another level of gaslighting where she's asking me to believe these incredibly bizarre things that were absolutely false. Or a third possibility is someone hijacked her account, they heard some things about me that were unfavorable, and so they composed this email and they didn't know all the facts, so they sort of filled in the blanks. So those are the only three possibilities. Either someone else wrote the email, or she wrote it and has false memories, or she wrote it and is intentionally gaslighting. All three of those, by the way, are not coming from a healthy place. So the validation to me is that although she's a wonderful person in many, many ways, she's very driven, has a great career, has great friends, But in a relationship with her, I did feel like I was in a relationship with someone who had narcissistic tendencies. I'm not going to diagnose her, but gaslighting is very much a behavior you see from narcissists. So it's a narcissistic behavior, and I can conclude that. And the level of gaslighting I saw in this email was, I won't share too many details with you, but just it's very clear that something is going on where either she's got these false memories and always worse than reality, or she's trying to gaslight me into believing things that are always worse than reality. We had a fairly great relationship for the most part, and much of the stuff I did for her I thought was very supportive of her, who she was, what she was trying to accomplish in life, her career, her hobbies, and I very much embodied a supportive boyfriend. And none of that came through in the email. It very much, she makes it sound like I was this manipulative, lying person, and that's just not the case. I value honesty above all else with virtues, and it's something I embody in myself. I tried lying once in college, and I lasted about 2 hours before my stomach started bothering me so much, and I decided, wait, if I'm lying, it's saying I don't like who I am, and I'm making up a story of who I want to be. And so instead of lying, I decided, I'll just be honest about who I am, because then if I don't like who I am, I can just change who I am. So I made that decision in college. The lying it didn't make sense. It didn't seem worth the trade-off, and so I went with honesty. But back to this email, the reason it was validating is because while dating, we would go through stretches where she was in a great mood and I could do no wrong, and I really valued those periods. But she would also go through stretches that were difficult for her, probably for a variety of reasons, and during those stretches she would look towards the outside world as to what's going wrong with her world. So she would blame her managers, she would blame her family, her friends, but most often me, because I'm the person she spent the most time with. So she would look to the outside world and say things like, I feel like the whole world's against me. That was a comment I would hear from time to time. And my role in this was that I was trying to be this supportive, doting boyfriend. And I just did mental gymnastics to try to validate her perspective and understand where she was coming from. And that's not a very healthy place to be with someone who's exhibiting narcissistic behavior. A much healthier place, at least according to a lot of therapists who deal with narcissistic behavior types, is to create clear boundaries. Some therapists suggest have a few narcissistic friends. They're the life of the party. They're often driven. They're often in really high places within their company. They have large social groups. They're really fun to be around. Most narcissists can really turn on the charm. So having narcissists in your friend network is perfectly a valid way of going about life. But most therapists suggest you need to have clear boundaries with any friends who have narcissistic behavior. And the reason I believe they suggest this is because narcissists often focus on just one person at a time to gaslight. And often it's their partner, not always, but often it's their partner, and they focus on gaslighting their partner and controlling their partner and trying to get their partner to do everything so that their life feels okay. Because remember, at the core of narcissism is thought to be insecurity. So even though this narcissist might come off as confident, that controlling nature is because they are so insecure, they're trying to control and manipulate the world around them. So my role in this was really that I was codependent, and I was really trying to manage her feelings for her and trying to help her deal with her feelings. And that's very unhealthy. That was something I had to work long and hard and do a lot of soul searching and look towards myself. And I'm sure I still do that at times. Often when we get stressed, we relax into old patterns. So I'm sure that I try to manage other people's feelings from time to time. But certainly when she would gaslight me, I was participating in that because I was coming back and saying, no, that's totally wrong. And I would have this kind of debate with her. And that's not a very healthy way to participate when you're being gaslit. instead drawing boundaries and making it clear, like, hey, your version of reality is false, and I need to step away to a distance where your version of reality can't affect me because your version of reality is false. So again, I'm talking about situations where it's not a matter of perspective, but it's just an absolute one. It's either true or it's not true. Like some of the examples I gave from this email, you gave me a toilet for my birthday. That's just false. That's not like, oh, I thought he did that, when, it's either you did or you didn't. Or I forced her to wash my grandmother's dirty feet and my father's dirty feet, which was something that never happened. I didn't force her to do anything, and she certainly never touched my grandmother's feet. Grandmother would have never allowed that, and she didn't touch my father's feet. Again, we didn't have that sort of relationship. So just very oddball things. Again, I don't know if these are false memories of hers or if she's just actively trying to gaslight me. Another portion of the gaslighting is that she says in this email that if I'm not willing to accept these things about me, and she says some pretty awful things about me from the perspective, again, like that I was a liar, a manipulator, all these things, and she's basing it on false information. So she's saying, if you're not willing to accept these things, then it's a sign you don't want to work on yourself, or that you're not accepting reality. And this is gaslighting 2.0. So it's making up false information, and it's saying, if you don't believe this false information that I'm using to draw these conclusions about you that are very negative, then you're not willing to do this self-work. And again, it's so clear to me now seeing this email, but I think at the time I was dating her, I would have fallen into that trap and defended myself and really spent a lot of time and energy and focus and thoughts on, how do I convince her otherwise? And that's definitely an unhealthy place to be, because here she is using false information to say bad things about me and then tell me that I'm unwilling to work on myself if I don't believe these bad things about me. And so just participating in that in the first place is a sign of poor health on my part. So again, what I could have done, and this is hindsight 2020, I could have stepped away and placed boundaries in place and been like, okay, we need to have boundaries. And I eventually did do that. It just took a very long time. One way to look at all this is that I put all this time and energy and thought into trying to cultivate a relationship that ultimately fell apart. And so it was a failure. But I choose to look at it more like college, where college is very expensive. You put a lot of time and attention in, and at the end, you have learned a lot of lessons. And I do feel like I learned a lot from that relationship. And certainly who I am now, and seeing this email, I feel very validated that I made a good choice to step away from that relationship when I did. And seeing this now makes me feel good about doing the work on myself. It's easy to find flaws in others, and I think it's a lot more challenging to find flaws in ourselves because we don't know what we don't know. And when I find flaws in myself, I work on them, and I, if it's, let's not talk about flaws for a moment. If I find a emotional wound, then I work on healing it. But what if I'm not aware of an emotional wound and how it's impacting me? So that's kind of where I was in my 20s, is I just wasn't aware of how I was emotionally wounded and how that was affecting me as a person, and how challenging that was, not only for me, but I imagine for anyone dating me at that time. So hit that like button if you appreciated hearing about my personal experience with narcissistic behavior, in particular someone gaslighting me, trying to get me to believe false information. And hit the subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this. And of course, a comment is always welcome, as it helps me understand what types of things you might have gone through. A lot of people out there have dealt with narcissistic type behavior and gaslighting, and everyone is different in how they respond to it. So I'd love to hear your comments. Thanks for your time.